Nuestros dos próximos ponentes tienen una característica que no tenían hasta ahora lo que hemos conversado. Es decir, aparte de ser académicos, analistas y políticos, ellos son dos ejemplos de la persecución de su país por medio de un poder judicial que no es independiente. Allan Brewer de Carias es abogado, ha sido profesor de posgrado en varias universidades, es un académico notorio y que pertenece a varias academias de Derecho en América Latina. Ha ejercido también el cargo de senador y ministro de Estado para la descentralización y es miembro de la Asamblea Nacional Constituyente de 1999. Él nos va a explicar qué es lo que ocurre en Venezuela con la justicia.
Bueno, yo quiero comenzar agradeciendo a Guillermo Lostó y al Instituto Interamericano para la Democracia por la invitación que me ha formulado para estar con ustedes acá esta mañana y lo honrado que estoy de estar en este panel con los doctores Fonrush, Zavala y Sánchez. Quiero también agradecer que le hayan pedido al presidente Hurtado que hiciera la presentación y felicitar al presidente Hurtado por esa tan precisa presentación y decirle que todo, absolutamente todo lo que dijo se aplica a Venezuela. No hay nada específico que se escape de su panorama. Y luego quiero pedirles excusas a todos los que hablan inglés y los que hablan español, porque mi querido amigo Guillermo me mandó un programa en inglés y me dijo que este era un evento en inglés y me dio 20 minutos para hablar y 20 minutos yo no normalmente, si eso me lo piden, lo pongo por escrito y lo he puesto por escrito en inglés, de manera que van a tener que oír un mal inglés todos. Pero ahí vamos. The most important institutional legacy left by Hugo Chávez Frías in Venezuela, after 14 years of authoritarian government, has been the complete control his government managed to establish upon the judicial branch of government, erasing from the political landscape of the country the very notion of separation of powers. The state of justice, which is an expression used in our Constitution, is essentially non-existent. And the political use of the judicial system, which is the title of this forum, is the most common trend of the judiciary in my country. The submission of the judicial system to the government began in 1999. After the unconstitutional convening of a custom-made constituent assembly, completely controlled by the followers of Hugo Chávez, then the newly elected President of the Republic. This Constituent Assembly was used to give the first of a series of coup d'etat in the country in order to assault politically all the branches of government, of course, despite the opposition of a very few independent members of that assembly, only 4 of 131 members. I was one of those 4 opposition members of the assembly, challenging since then the unconstitutional assault of power. After my experience in the Constituent Assembly, I wrote a book published in 2002, named Golpe de Estado y Proceso Constituyente en Venezuela. And it was precisely the explanation of how the Constituent Assembly gave that coup d'etat. It was published in Mexico by the UNAM, and later was reprinted in Ecuador. Anyway, at that time, I must say, to say that the Constituent Assembly gave a coup d'etat was more or less a heresy. Now, and particularly after hearing the the word of President Hurtado, it is very clear that this was the technique used at the time. Anyway, one of the first decisions of that assembly was the political intervention of the judiciary by appointing a so-called Commission of Judicial Emergency, which, although with other name, continued to function in an endless transitory way until 2011, in charge of dismissing and appointing judges in a discretionary way, that is, in charge of preventing the enforcement of the provision of the Constitution regarding the independence, the autonomy, and the impartiality of judges. That assembly also eliminated the former Supreme Court of Justice, dismissed all its justice, and proceed to appoint new justice of the new Supreme Tribunal, but without fulfilling the conditions established in the to-be new 1999 Constitution, beginning by the Supreme Court being completely packed with the president's supporters. It has been precisely that Supreme Tribunal, which in Venezuela, different to the cases of the Consejo de la Magistratura, which in Venezuela is the body in charge of the governing and managing the judiciary, that Supreme Court has been the one that during the past 14 years has been the most obnoxious instrument for consolidating authoritarianism in my country, as well as the main tool in order to legitimate the violation of the Constitution, being the government absolutely sure that the controlled tribunal will never exercise any sort of judicial review regarding the unconstitutional acts of the government. And this has been, in fact, the situation during the past years. The consequence of the political control of the judiciary has been the complete absence of judicial review over the government actions, a situation that was completely consolidated in 2004 when the new organic law of the Supreme Tribunal was sanctioned, increasing the number of the magistrates from 20 to 32, distorting again the constitutional condition for their appointment and for their dismissal. The reform at that moment in 2004 was reported by the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights, saying that the reform lacked the safeguard necessary to prevent other branches of government from undermining the Supreme Tribunal independence and to keep narrow or temporarily majority from determining its composition. And in fact, after the reform, the process for selecting new magistrates was completely controlled by the President of the Republic, as was publicly recognized by the head of the Parliamentary Nominating Committee when he publicly recognized and accepted the personal involvement of the President of the Republic in the process, announcing regarding the selected justice that there is no one in the group that could act against us. As simple as that, completely eliminating the autonomy of the judiciary as the basic principle of the separation of power. Through that Supreme Court or tribunal, the political control over all the judges has been also assured and progressively reinforced, making, in fact, completely inapplicable the provision of the 1999 Constitution regarding the independence and the autonomy of judges that was supposed to be guaranteed by means of their selection through public competition and by their removal only by courts of a disciplinary jurisdiction that doesn't exist. On the contrary, since 2000, no public competition has been made in order to appoint judges, being the judiciary almost exclusively made of temporary and provisional judges that can be dismissed in a discretionary way. This political control exercised upon the judiciary is the only explanation to all the cases of political persecution against dissidents developed in the country. Guillermo has asked me to refer to a few cases of this political persecution. And I think a few cases can be highlighted. For instance, first, of judges that has decided cases not satisfactory for the government and that has not pleased some high official that has been persecuted. Second, against enterprises and their main shareholders, particularly in the media world, because their opposition to the government policies. Third, against innocent people that were blamed of crimes they did not commit just in order to liberate the real criminals because of their support to the government. And fourth, in order to persecute political outspoken individuals that have criticized the authoritarian government. One of the leading cases showing the persecution against judges because daring to decide in an independent way was the case of the members of the First Court on Judicial Review of Administrative Action, Corte Primera de lo Contencioso Administrativo, which in 2003 issued a preliminary injunction suspending in a temporary way the decision of the government to hire Cuban doctors for medical social programs in Caracas, but they did not have the required license. That policy was challenged by the Venezuelan Federation of Doctors, and the injunction was issued. The response of the government to that judicial decision not only was the official announcement made by the President of the Republic himself that the decision was not going to be enforced, but the subsequent search of the court by the secret police and the abruptly dismissal of all the judges remain in that court, the Court for Judicial Review of Administrative Action, closed for 1 year. The demonstrative effect of such action was really devastating, resulting since then that the factual inexistence of any possibility of judicial review of administrative action in Venezuela. The case was brought before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, and after a 2008 decision condemning the state, the Supreme Tribunal in Venezuela response to the international ruling at the request of the government was that that decision was not enforceable in Venezuela. The other leading case regarding the judicial detention and persecution of judges took place in December 2009 after a criminal judge, Maria Afiuni Mora, adopted a decision following a formal recommendation of the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, ordering the release of an individual in order for him to face criminal trial while in freedom, as it is guaranteed in the Constitution. The decision, nobody knows exactly why, but did not please personally to the President of the Republic, who 1 hour later, after the decision was taken, he appeared in television asking for the detention of the judge and for her condemnation to 30 years of prison, a term only established for horrendous crimes. Anyway, the fact is that the judge from that day has remained in detention without trial, although recently in house arrest. After such reaction, the same United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention described those facts as a blow of the President Hugo Chavez to the independence of judges and lawyers in the country, demanding the immediate release of the judge and concluding that reprisal for exercising their constitutional guarantee function and creating a climate of fear among the judiciary and lawyers' profession serve no purpose except to undermine the rule of law and obstruct justice. Regarding the second group of cases in which the judiciary has been used for political persecution, they are the cases referred to the exercise of freedom of expression, concluding in the shutdown of a TV station with a political line in opposition of the government. It was the case of Radio Caracas Televisión, the most important television station of in that time of the country. It was a vivid example of the illegitimate collusion or confabulation between the political control judiciary and the authoritarian government in order to reduce freedom of expression, and not only that, but to confiscate the property of that TV station. And that was made not through a government decision, but through a judicial decision of the Supreme Tribunal, knowing that they were not subjected to any sort of control. Also, in relation to freedom of expression, persecution against the shareholders of TV station has been developing in the country. Guillermo Zuluaga and Nelson Meserane, two distinguished businessmen, shareholders of another TV station, Globovisión, were also subjected to persecution. They had been harassed by the public prosecutor, accused of different common crimes that they did not commit, and their property has been confiscated. They also had to leave the country, and their cases are before the Commission, the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. Other cases, for instance, has been used as an instrument of the government to pervert justice, distorting the fact in a specific political cases, converting innocent people into criminals and liberating criminals of all suspicion. It was the case of the unfortunate mass killings committed by government agents and supporters as a consequence of a so-called military Plan Ávila in April 2011, April 11, 2002, in a demonstration, very important, asking for the resignation of the president. After everybody saw in television who was fighting and how was those fighting made, the history was changed, rewritten, and the criminals were treated as heroes, and the police officers protecting the demonstration were condemned to 30 years in prison as common criminals. And not only that, a former Chief Justice of the Criminal Chamber of the Supreme Tribunal, last year, 2012, a general named Aponte, after he left the country, he confessed publicly that he received orders from the President of the Republic not to free those police officers. And they were in custody because he followed orders of the executive. This is a confession made. Imagine many saw that confession in television. Other cases was the case of the former opposition candidate in 2006 when the first re-election of Chavez. This candidate, a former governor of one of the big states in the country, the Estado Zulia, was called by Chavez in television programs, as always, as a bandit, a corrupt, a thief, a mafia member. He treated that candidate to put him in jail and to erase him from the political map of Venezuela. Not long after, the public prosecutor accused Rosales, and he has to leave the country. Other cases like the case of Diego Arria, a former president of the Security Council of the United Nations, ambassador of Venezuela, former ambassador of Venezuela. His land was rescued by the government, and the answer when he said that he was going to defend his property, the answer of Chavez again was that to take back his property was the only way was to overthrow Chavez. And the fact is that the judicial claim he filed has never been admitted by any court. And in 2012, the Constitutional Chamber of the Supreme Tribunal took over the case just to be sure that it will never be admitted in the country. Other case, of course, of political persecution using the judiciary has been my own case. Guillermo asked me to refer to that case, but I have here one of my lawyers before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, Professor Doc Cassels, and I think we don't have much time to refer to my own case. But anyway, it has been a case of political persecution, and we have heard 1 month ago in the hearings at the Inter-American Court of Human Rights how at that time, general prosecutor of the country confessed before the court. He almost was one of our witnesses, but it was the witness of the state saying that the accusation against me was just based in newspaper cuttings of gossips and comments of journalists. And because of those newspaper cuttings, I have been accused of conspiring to change violently the constitution of my country. And you can be sure that the only weapon I have ever had is my pen and my freedom of speech. But that's the fact that has forced me to be outside my country and not being able to return. The whole judicial, the important aspect of, to be stressed as a conclusion from all these cases is the fact that the political control developed over the judiciary in Venezuela and the use of the judicial system as a tool for the prosecution has not been conducted in a clandestine way, as it has been said previously here. It has been openly said and announced and systematically announced in order to subject the courts to the government. This intensified after 2004 when temporarily the court was not completely controlled by Chavez, and he asked again in a television program that the need to get rid of those justices of the Supreme Tribunal that vote based on political position, that is, in position contrary to the government. And after that, he himself participated in the packing of the tribunal with openly affiliated members of the political party supporting the government. The submission was also confirmed, the submission of the judiciary to the government was also confirmed last year by the same General Aponte, former Chief Justice of the Criminal Chamber of the Supreme Court, when he confessed also in TV that the autonomy of the judiciary in Venezuela was not more than a fallacy. This is his own word. Being the judiciary completely controlled by the executive, and mentioning specifically a weekly meeting held in the office of the Vice President of the Republic, the executive, in order to decide each Friday what was going to be done by the judiciary and in which sense the orders were going to be given to the judges to decide according to the political panorama of that week. All these facts shows the absolute lack of, in Venezuela, of the most essential pillar of democracy, that is the existence of an autonomous judiciary and a system of separation of power, which at the same time is the most fundamental element of the rule of law, regarding which the president of the Supreme Tribunal of Venezuela 2 years ago exclaimed also to the press that the separation of power weakens the state and that such principle has to be changed and reformed. With this situation, it is not difficult then to imagine what is the real and effective possibility for anyone dissenting from the government and for any reason that has become the target of the government to defend himself before any court in the country. And now, and for the near future, not even before the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, because as you know, Venezuela has unconstitutionally, against our own constitution, denunciated the convention, the American Convention of Human Rights. These are also, unfortunately, some aspect of the current situation of that state of justice in Venezuela, where the political use of the judiciary system in all this past decade has been the main trend of the functioning of the judiciary in Venezuela. Thanks again.